This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Kelly Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. China ramps up military pressure with a second day of large-scale drills in the Taiwan Strait, simulating strikes on key ports and energy hubs on the island. Well, Beijing says its rescue team and supplies are safe after Myanmar's military opened fire on its aid convoy for quake victims. Now, South Korean police are mobilizing all available resources to prevent chaos ahead of Friday's ruling on impeached President Yoon Suk Yeol. And investors and business leaders around the globe nervously await details on fresh U.S. tariffs, which could spark a global trade war. Also in East Asia tonight, turning ideas into reality. We look at some of the challenges of starting a business in Hong Kong in part 2 of our series on the city's young entrepreneurs. China has held large-scale military exercises around Taiwan for a second day, while Beijing says its military conducted long-range live-firing drills in the East China Sea, practicing precision strikes on Taiwan's port and energy facilities. Well, Taiwan has condemned the exercises and deployed its own forces to monitor the situation. Taipei says it detected 27 Chinese aircraft, 21 warships, including the Shandong carrier group, and 10 Coast Guard boats around the island. Well, the U.S. has condemned what it called China's aggressive military activities and rhetoric towards Taiwan, saying it will only escalate tensions.
The president is emphasizing the importance of maintaining peace in the Taiwan Strait, encouraging the peaceful resolution of these cross-strait issues, reiterating our opposition to any unilateral attempts to change the status quo by force or coercion.
Well, amid the escalating tensions, there are mixed views among Taiwan residents about the government's response.
对于他们的跟他们的关系，我们是可以稍微柔软一点点，不要那么针锋相对啊。对，就怕会擦枪走火。对，这是我的感觉。
不清楚他们实际，就是他们实际到底是有没有真的想要侵略台湾，但是相信政府应该可以保护好我们。
Right, CNA's Olivia Seong, she joins us now live from Beijing. Ollie, it's day 2 of drills. What exactly do you think China is trying to signal with the drills today?
Well, I think it's quite clear that Beijing is continuing to step up its pressure on Taiwan with this second day of large-scale drills. And here's why. There's some differences in the exercises that we are seeing today. Earlier this morning, we saw the military announce a code name for the exercise, Straight Thunder 2025A. And analysts I've spoken to say that giving the exercise a code name makes it official, even though there have been conflicting reports from state media as to whether yesterday's drill did fall under this code name, but that doesn't really matter that much because the substantive is that Beijing is, stepping up its activities around Taiwan Island as what it says is a, quote, stern warning to the island's leader, William Lai, whom it deemed as a separatist. Beijing also angered as Mr. Lai had recently called China a, quote, foreign hostile force. Now, Beijing, we know, claims Taiwan as part of its territory and has not renounced the use of force to bring the self-ruled island under its control. And according to China's defense ministry today, they said that the drills today test joint operation capabilities and the military's capabilities in enforcing a blockade and precision strikes. But where things are different too is that today's drills involved live firing exercises in the East China Sea, which is seen as escalating tensions in the Taiwan Strait. Now, the East China Sea is the body of water also that separates Taiwan with Japan. And this is noteworthy as well as we had seen the U.S. Defense Secretary recently visit Tokyo and describe Japan as an indispensable partner to the U.S. when it comes to, quote, what he says is Chinese military aggression. The Chinese Defense Ministry also saying today that the Shandong aircraft carrier was involved in the the exercises and this warship being used too in previous large-scale drills near Taiwan Island. So what is clear from Beijing is that it's not letting up on its pressure of the Self-Root Island despite what's happening there.
So, give us a sense of the reaction from Beijing, because there have been a lot of concerns raised, right, by other countries over these live fire drills near Taiwan.
That's right. It's quite unclear also whether there was any prior warning given about the live firing exercises, as we had seen Beijing do in the past, and as is with, recognized conventions when it comes to such exercises. But observers do say that this does show growing assertiveness on the part of Beijing when it comes to Taiwan. We also saw the response there from the U.S. saying that these drills put the region at risk, but that its enduring commitment to U.S. allies and partners, including Taiwan, continues. We saw similar views echoed by the European Union, which said that it opposes any unilateral changes that change the status quo by force or coercion, also calling for restraint. But in Beijing, the Chinese Foreign Ministry was asked about this, and the spokesperson refuted these accusations, saying that this was a mischaracterization of the situation and that Taiwan is China's internal affair. Have a listen.
任何外部势力无权对此说三道四。台独挑衅一日不止，反独惩戒一刻不停。我们绝不允许任何人、任何势力以任何方式将台湾从中国分裂出去，将采取一切必要措施，坚定捍卫国家主权和领土完整。
Now, observers have also said, however, that the foreign ministry statements are largely consistent with the language that it has used over Taiwan in the past. But what Beijing will likely be doing and watching very closely is how the U.S. and its partners may respond beyond just these statements of opposition. This is especially as the Trump administration hasn't been explicitly clear on how it could potentially act when it comes to Taiwan, especially as it has pivoted to this America First policy, which has affected how it engages even with its traditional allies. But as we have seen earlier this year, 2 American warships sailing through the Taiwan Strait, the first time under the second Trump administration, that angering Beijing. What is clear, though, is that recent moves from the U.S. and these statements, including looming tariffs that are set to be announced overnight, are certainly going to escalate tensions between these two superpowers. Otelli.
Thanks so much for that. CNA's Olivia Seong in Beijing. Well, we're going to keep the conversation going on these escalating cross-strait tensions. So now let's bring in Lim Tai-wei, professor at Soka University of Japan. Well, thanks for joining us this evening, Prof. We've heard there from what Olivia said about how these drills are quite different in the sense that they've got a code name now. It's live firing drills we're talking about. We don't know whether if it's quite a surprise drill at this point. But if you could just tell us, what does this basically say about China's current strategy towards Taiwan?
Well, the current strategy towards Taiwan is that it wants to sort of, from its perspective, warn against what it considers to be separatist forces within Taiwan. And so this drill comes as a part of a series of drills that has intensified since the former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi's visit. So there is a general trend towards a normalization of this kind of drills, with some intensifications during times when it perceives that there is a need for such advisory to be given to its Taiwanese counterparts. And another aspect of the drill is that it is done in 360 degrees format, including the lightly inhabited eastern coast of Taiwan. So this is likely to again normalize and regularize from henceforth whenever they conduct such drills, which
in other words,
to some analysts resemble a form of embargo.
Right. So in other words, you're saying that because this code name, right, for this particular set of drills is called Straight Thunder 2025A, that this could possibly suggest that it could be followed by Group B exercises in the near future.
In the past, whenever there was a serial number, it appears that there was a follow-up. But again, we would not know because this is to a form of keeping people or analysts guessing about the intentions of the drill. It also depends on the situational factors involved because China and actually the whole of Northeast Asian political culture is one of high context culture. So it places a lot of premium on symbolisms, and symbolisms will change when environmental factors change. So they will probably recalibrate, whether there's a need for a sustainable B series or henceforth, other series that may emanate from this.
And Professor Lim, let's just talk about the timing as well of all these drills. I mean, do you read into it as perhaps a test of the U.S. commitment to Taiwan while the U.S., as we're awaiting all these tariffs announcements from the White House?
There's a lot of speculation in the international media that this is timed with the SecDef U.S. Secretary of Defense visit or certain phrases that were uttered by the leader of Taiwan in the recent past. However, these are all speculations at this moment because it's based on conjectures. What we do know is that the drill, as officially announced by them, is to warn the so-called separatist forces from the China's perspective and to sort of decease them from pushing the envelope further.
And do we know, what sort of psychological impact, this sort of drills actually have on the people in China and Taiwan? I mean, do they influence public opinion or political decision making at all?
In the past, there was a bit of a shock because, especially during the former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi's visit, that kind of drill was a rather new feature in terms of intensity and eventually engulfing the eastern coast of Taiwan to resemble a potential perceived maritime embargo. So it did create some kind of a shock or perhaps raising the eyebrows of analysts. However, it appears that with normalization, the Taiwanese people appears to be less much more self-restrained in terms of being affected by the drills. Moreover, there are overtures within the region, for example, within Northeast Asia, cooperating on economic matters of urgency first that sort of mitigate the sharp edges of the drill. So if the other priorities exist in tandem with such advisories to the perceived separatist forces perceived by China, right, then it may mitigate the sort of situation at hand.
And Professor, we're talking about precision strikes here on potential targets in Taiwan. Should we be worried about potential consequences, whether it's unintended or intended?
There has always been worries about accidents happening, and to prevent such accidents happening, for example, Japan and China has set up a maritime hotline that can allow them to reach each other very quickly. And also accidents that may happen can be mitigated by the fact that there are, in the post-pandemic era, regularized exchange of ground commanders and defense forces of China and Japan. So this will help to sort of mitigate the possibility of accidents, which many in the region really fear may spiral into unintended consequences.
Right. Many thanks for your analysis there. Professor Lim Tai-wei from Soka University of Japan. Well, Beijing has ramped up military drills around Taiwan in recent years. And let's take a look at some of the exercises and what happened around them. Now, as our guest mentioned, then U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan in August 2022 in a show of Washington's commitment to the island. Beijing slammed the U.S. for damaging peace and stability in the region. Now, Chinese warplanes buzzed the line, dividing the Taiwan Strait before Ms. Pelosi's arrival, and held several days of war games. There were ballistic missiles launches, some flying over Taipei, as well as sea and air attack simulations. Now, in April 2023, China staged 3 days of drills around Taiwan when then President Tsai Ing-wen returned to Taipei after meeting with then U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy in Los Angeles. Now, China once again launched large-scale military exercises surrounding Taiwan in May 2024, 3 days after the island's new president, William Lai, was inaugurated. Beijing has made clear it does not approve of Mr. Lai, an advocate for Taiwan independence. And then more drills were held in October in response to Mr. Lai's National Day speech, where he vowed to resist annexation by Beijing. Those exercises, according to Taiwan, saw China use a record number of military aircraft. The one-day drills, codenamed Joint Sword 2024B, involved the Chinese Army, Navy, Air and Rocket Forces. Beijing said it was legitimate and necessary for its sovereignty and national unity. And 2 months later, Taiwan reported Chinese Air Force and Navy activity around the island. China did not confirm it was holding exercises, but analysts said they could be in response to Mr. Lai's tour of the Pacific, which included stops in Hawaii and the U.S. territory of Guam. But time now for a short break, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, China revving up its vehicle-to-grid plan, setting up pilots in 30 cities that would use the country's growing fleet of EVs as mobile batteries. And retail giant Walmart continuing to squeeze Chinese suppliers to cut prices. We'll explain why next. Hello again. It is now time for your business news with Roland Lim. Now, Roland, all eyes, ears, all going to be on President Trump's tariff announcements coming later tonight, right, Roland? What can we expect?
That's right, Sally. President Trump reportedly locked in discussion with aides as he irons out his plan to ratchet up duties. Investors have been on edge as the size, shape and duration of the tariffs are all unknown, and the breadth of the countries affected remain up in the air. Already, tariffs on everything from semiconductors to aluminium have roiled global markets and triggered a dash for safe havens such as gold and the Japanese yen. Fears are deepening that a full-blown trade war could trigger a sharp global economic slowdown. Speculation about what President Trump has in store, stoking uncertainty on trading floors. Japan's Nikkei 225 ending with a small rise after swinging between gains and losses today. South Korea's Kospi Index ending the day 0.6% in the red, while the Taiwan weighted index also unchanged at 21,298 points. Investors are hoping Trump's announcement later tonight could finally clarify his tariff policies and lessen uncertainties on the outlook. But Christina Hooper, she is Chief Global Market Strategist at Invesco, warns there may still be more market volatility ahead.
I think we're going to see continued uncertainty, an increase in uncertainty. What we're hearing is that tomorrow will likely be about caps on tariffs, the highest levels that we're likely to see. But keep in mind that there are a lot of different goods and a lot of different countries that could see tariffs applied in coming days and weeks and months. So certainly there is no guarantee that Liberation Day is the end of tariffs. We could certainly see see a lot in the way of adjustments, changes, and additions beyond tomorrow. I didn't even mention the potential for retaliatory tariffs and several different countries banding together, which is what we heard is going to happen. So I think that there is the very real potential. We see a lot of volatility in the S&P 500 this year, but it is an incredibly difficult year to place a target for the end of the year because we don't know how long these policies are going to last. Not only do we have what is the potential for tariff wars, but we also have some very significant, aggressive government spending cuts in the U.S., all of which can conspire to send the U.S. economy into a recession and, of course, send stocks down. So it is very hard to put an estimate on the end of the year S&P 500, but I can tell you I do expect a high level of volatility.
China and Hong Kong stocks also ended roughly flat, and the yuan ending the domestic session at a near one-month low against the dollar, as markets hope for more clarity on Trump's tariff plans. The Washington Post reports, citing unnamed sources, that the White House aides have drafted a proposal to impose tariffs of around 20% on most imports to the U.S. And the looming tariff announcement comes on top of already increased levies on all goods from China. Faro Capital's Hamza Ayub explains what this means for Chinese stocks.
There are some estimates that if U.S. goes max on tariffs, which is like 25% on Canada, Mexico, 15% on Asia, Europe, and then 60% on China, Asian growth can be impacted by 1.8 to 2% until 2028, which is cumulative. Obviously, that is going to have a negative impact. But we also have to keep in mind that growth and markets do not always move hand to hand, right? And in China, what we are more focused on right now is the NPC announcement. There were incremental steps that they have been taking over the last few years, last 2 years. What was missing, like I said, was the focus on private sector and the domestic demand side of things. And our view is that the productivity gains that will come from the resurgence of private sector over the long term, short term, yes, they'll be back, but over the long term will take care of whatever the negative implications of the tariffs are. But we have to keep in mind that over the last few years, especially when it comes to China, the whole value chain of private sector, from public to private to venture capital, got disturbed. The terminal values collapsed, the valuations collapsed, and the animal spirit just waned off, right? If you're a founder, if you're a CEO, where do you put capital? Because you don't have any certainty as to what the government intention is for them, for the private sector. That has changed. And that is the big underlying theme, I think, which kind of is bigger than what the tariffs are about.
China is pushing to expand vehicle-to-grid, or V2G, technology, turning electric cars into mobile power banks. Plans are in the works to launch pilot projects in 9 cities to shore up power supply on the grid during spikes in demand. The move follows rules issued last year by the state planner to strengthen the integration of new energy vehicles with the grid. Now, this is to address concerns the rapid adoption of EVs would overwhelm the generation and transmission systems. Under the plan, the country's growing fleet of electric vehicles would act as batteries and send stored energy back to the grid during power shortages. Grid-connected cars could also adjust their charging times to avoid peak periods and provide critical services such as frequency regulation. Officials see these services potentially becoming an alternative revenue stream for house owners as well as operators of charging stations. But power grid companies are responsible for setting up the pilot. Last year, the state regulator said it would set up about 50 pilot programs by 2025. However, industry experts say that there are a range of hurdles to overcome before the large-scale adoption of V2G. U.S. retail giant Walmart is reportedly continuing to push its Chinese suppliers to cut prices to offset import tariffs. This despite pushback from Beijing, which summoned the company's executives last month, warning of potential retaliation. Now, people familiar with the matter said that the world's largest retailer is not backing down from demanding its suppliers cut prices by as much as 10% for each round of tariffs, a demand that some Chinese manufacturers are finding hard to meet. Now, their woes are expected to grow in the face of potential reciprocal tariffs due this week, adding a further 20% duty on Chinese imports. Walmart is popular in China with producers who see the company as a reliable customer for its goods. Some manufacturers say they are exploring alternative locations in Cambodia and Vietnam in a bid to maintain relationships with the retail giant. Other retailers, such as Target and Costco, say that they're also negotiating with their suppliers. And that'll do it for Business. Oteli.
Thanks so very much, Roland. Well, we're going to go for another break now, but coming up on East Asia tonight, South Korea files yet another impeachment motion, this time against the finance minister. The country's on edge for Friday's ruling on President Yoon Suk Yeol's impeachment. And China calls on Chinese firms to cooperate with Thai authorities investigating the collapse of a Bangkok building during the recent earthquake. You're watching East Asia tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. China's military escalates ongoing drills around Taiwan, the drills targeting key ports and energy sites on the island. Human rights groups call on Myanmar's military government to give international aid workers access to help earthquake survivors. And South Korea's acting president asks the nation to accept President Yoon Suk Yeol's impeachment verdict, urging calm ahead of the court ruling just 2 days away. Well, tensions are running high in South Korea ahead of the Constitutional Court's Friday ruling on President Yoon Suk Yeol's impeachment. Protesters for and against his removal are staging sit-in demonstrations around Seoul, and there are growing fears that these could turn violent should the verdict go against their wishes. Electing President Han Duck-soo has called on the nation to calmly accept the court's decision. CNA's Lim Yun-suk has more.
Police are on high alert as large-scale rallies for and against the impeachment of President Yoon Suk Yeol are set to be held near the Constitutional Court, which will announce its ruling on Friday. Acting President Han Duck-soo called for calm, urging South Koreans to accept the court's ruling. He also urged political leaders not to make comments that could incite violence.
지금은 정치적 유불리를 떠나 공동체의 안정과 생존을 우선해야 할 때입니다. 분열과 갈등보다는 사회 통합에 기여하는 책임 있는 자세를 보여주시기 바랍니다. 특히 불법 시위와 폭력을 자극하거나 유도할 수 있는 발언들은 삼가해 주실 것을 간곡히 부탁드립니다.
Several streets leading to the Constitutional Court have been cordoned off. Tourist attractions and schools in the area will also be closed. Some 14,000 officers are expected to be deployed in Seoul on the day of the ruling. In 2017, after the Constitutional Court ruled to impeach then-President Park Geun-hye over allegations of corruption, violent protests erupted, leaving 3 people dead. The ruling People Power Party has said it will accept the court's decision, saying political parties should take the lead in promoting national unity. Lee Jae-myung, the head of the main opposition Democratic Party, said he believes the court will reach a wise decision.
헌법 자체를 통째로 파괴하려 한 행위, 그 행위에 대해서 헌정 질서를 지키기 위한 결단이 없을 수가 있겠습니까? 저는 헌법재판소가 헌법의 질서와 이념, 대한민국 민주공화국의 가치를 존중해서 합당한 판정을 내릴 것으로 믿습니다.
President Yoon has also remained silent since the Constitutional Court said its 8 justices from the 9-member bench would announce its decision on Friday. To remove President Yoon from office, 6 out of the 8 judges must agree to impeach him. Otherwise, he will be reinstated into the presidential office. Lim Yun-suk, CNA, Seoul.
Meanwhile, a new impeachment motion is already on the table, this time for Deputy Prime Minister Chae Sang-mok, who's also the finance minister. Well, Mr. Chae became acting president in December after the ousters of both President Yoon and his replacement Han Duck-soo. But the opposition criticized Mr. Chae for blocking bills and delaying the appointment of a Constitutional Court justice already approved by the National Assembly. Opposition parties, led by the majority Democratic Party, proposed this latest impeachment motion last month. Mr. Yoon's People Power Party oppose impeaching Mr. Chae, calling it a futile act of revenge and abuse of power. Now, policymakers have to vote on the impeachment within the next 24 to 72 hours. But it's not clear if it will take place. The opposition says it's waiting for the ruling on Mr. Yoon's impeachment this Friday to decide whether they will proceed with Mr. Che's. The Myanmar army says that it fired warning shots yesterday when a Chinese Red Cross aid convoy failed to stop in a conflict zone. The incident comes amid calls from UN agencies, rights groups and foreign governments for a halt in fighting in the wake of a powerful 7.7 magnitude earthquake that devastated the conflict-riven country. Myanmar's military says the Chinese Red Cross did not inform the government nor the embassy of its presence in the area. China says both the rescue team and supplies are safe and urges all parties in Myanmar to prioritize quick relief efforts. Several rebel armed groups have already suspended hostilities following the disaster. Well, recovery efforts are ongoing despite fading hopes of finding any more survivors. The disaster has killed more than 2,800 people, with the toll expected to rise further. More than 370 people are still missing, believed to be trapped under the debris. The UN warns of a risk of disease outbreak such as cholera and malaria. It has urged the global community to help before the monsoon rains hit. Many areas are still without power, telephone or cell connections, and damaging roads and bridges. The powerful quake has also compounded an already dire humanitarian crisis in Myanmar, hard hit by civil war. International relief has been pouring into the nation after the military government issued a rare plea for aid last week. Well, rescue workers, sniffer dogs, paramedics and millions of dollars in aid are being sent by major contributors such as the US, China and a number of other Asian countries. Japan says it's ready to provide up to $6 million in aid. India ramping up its response to the disaster, sending water purifiers and drinking water. While Russia has set up a mobile hospital in Mandalay. Well, survivors in Myanmar are facing a shortage of water, food and medicine nearly a week after a powerful earthquake struck the country. CNA's team is on the ground in Myanmar and they look at the global community's efforts to provide some sort of relief for those who are left with nothing.
Finding light in one of Myanmar's darkest moments. In the outskirts of Mandalay, one of the worst-hit areas by Friday's powerful earthquake, acts of kindness are emerging in Jamyatasi Township. Finding a safe roof over their heads is another urgent concern. While most volunteers are from within Myanmar, international help has also arrived. One of the first foreign aid groups on the ground in Myanmar was Humanity Matters. The team from Singapore brought a water treatment system that supplies safe drinking water to survivors of the earthquake, including those who are in hospitals. They're also setting up temporary shelters for 600 families who lost their homes. For the next 2 months, the relief shelters will provide toilets, living spaces and communal kitchens, offering some relief to those left with nothing.
The devastation is massive in terms of extent and scale. And many people have lost their dear ones, while many more are left homeless. People are traumatized, not only by the original devastating earthquake, but also by the daily occurrence of the string of aftershocks measuring between 5 to 6.4 magnitude. So those whose homes are destroyed or damaged, and those who fear to return to their homes are now living in the open in the midst of a heat wave with soaring temperatures of over 37 degrees Celsius. It is therefore crucial that they are protected from the trying weather elements and are appropriately hydrated to prevent any illnesses.
The United Nations says 25 rescue teams from 13 countries are now on the ground in Myanmar. But the backbone of the relief efforts is the people of Myanmar. They know the streets, these neighborhoods, the places where homes once stood, helping in whatever ways they can to hold their shattered communities together. Leong Mai-kit, CNA.
China's embassy in Thailand is calling on Chinese companies to cooperate with the Thai government's investigation into the collapse of a Bangkok skyscraper. Well, the embassy also called on companies to follow local laws and contribute positively and sent its condolences for the building disaster. The Thai authorities have launched an investigation into construction firms involved in the 30-story tower on suspicions they used shoddy materials in the structure. The tower under construction, about 45% complete, was meant to be the State Audit Office. Now, it's a joint venture between a subsidiary of China's state-owned China Railway Group and an Italian-Thai company. Meanwhile, rescue operations in Bangkok have entered the second phase, but chances of finding survivors are low. Officials say the death toll is now at 22 and dozens are still missing. Thailand's search and rescue dogs sent to sniff through the debris for signs of life are now doubling up as emotional support animals for the grieving families. South and Southeast Asian leaders are in Thailand this week for a trade and security summit where U.S. tariffs and the Myanmar earthquake are likely to feature heavily in talks. Scheduled bilateral talks include a meeting between the prime ministers of India and Thailand. Rebecca Bundan has more.
As the first BIMSTEC summit held in person since 2018, the meeting of the grouping in Bangkok is a unique and important platform for India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi to connect with the region. Thailand, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Nepal and Myanmar are the other member nations. It comes as analysts say that New Delhi is focusing on strengthening ties with Thailand and Myanmar, which it sees as valuable partners in its neighbourhood and an important gateway to Southeast Asia. The summit is being held at a critical time.
Southeast Asian countries themselves are worried about the coming US-China contestation and how under Trump America might be weaning itself away from certain geographies, perhaps to focus more on the Indo-Pacific, but at this point we don't know. So they are looking for partners. And India remains, of course, geographically present there, economically increasing its footprint. And also in defense-wise, if you look at India's footprint in Southeast Asia, that had been expanding.
Enhancing trade, connectivity and maritime cooperation are some of the main areas of interest for India. But the summit will also address other issues, as Myanmar remains embroiled in a civil war.
The focus will remain on Myanmar and, of course, on Bangladesh, because both countries have undergone both countries are undergoing a transformation. Myanmar, of course, has had a very tragic earthquake. So I think we are going to see a lot of that engagement, a lot of that focus on how to retain this grouping's focus on those areas, on those countries where there are changes.
With the earthquake hitting Myanmar and impacting Thailand too, India's foreign ministry says this highlights the importance of disaster management collaboration in the region. A bilateral meeting between Mr. Modi and Thai Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra is on the agenda for Thursday. The two sides are expected to sign several agreements. Bangladesh has requested a meeting between interim government head Muhammad Yunus and Mr. Modi, but New Delhi hasn't confirmed that talks will take place. With Dhaka's ties with China deepening and ousted former leader Sheikh Hasina's continued presence in India, these strained relations may also come into focus during the BIMSTEC summit. Rebecca Bundan, CNA, Mumbai.
China has warned the Philippines not to threaten peace in the region after Washington approved the possible sale of billion-dollar F-16 fighter jets to Manila. Beijing says Manila's defense and security cooperation should not target or harm any third party, and any cooperation should not escalate tensions in the region. Washington, meanwhile, is backing its ally, approving the sale of 20 F-16s and related equipment. The U.S. says the deal will strengthen the Philippines' security, calling it an important force for stability and economic progress in Southeast Asia. It also says the jets will improve Manila's maritime domain awareness and improve its capability to counter enemy air defenses. Tensions between Manila and Beijing are simmering after recent confrontations in the South China Sea. Manila has also weighed in on the ongoing Chinese drills around Taiwan. Philippines military chief Romero Brawner said that his country would inevitably be involved in any conflict there. He urged troops to start preparing, saying northern Luzon, closest to Taiwan, could be a target, but did not name any potential aggressor. Beijing responded quickly, its foreign affairs spokesperson warning the Philippines not to play with fire or make provocations on the Taiwan issue. China has rejected reports linking a Chinese research ship in Australian waters with the country's upcoming federal election. China's embassy in Australia released a statement saying the ship's passage near the coast of Victoria this week has nothing to do with ties between the two countries, and that the vessel was conducting routine scientific research with a route set in accordance with the international waterway. Officials say they had maintained close communication with Australian authorities over the issue. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said earlier this week that he would prefer if the ship was not in Australian waters, but acknowledged that it is unlikely China has broken international law. He added that the Australian Defence Force monitored the vessel as it returned to China. The issue has become the centre of a heated political debate in Australia, just 4 days into election campaigning. Opposition leader Peter Dutton has slammed Mr. Albanese's response to the issue, saying he believes the vessel is gathering intelligence and mapping the route of Australia's undersea cables. Chinese media, in response to this, has accused Mr. Dutton of, quote, beating the drums of war. The incident follows an earlier one in February that caused an uproar in Canberra when the Chinese Navy conducted a live-fire exercise in international waters between Australia and New Zealand, forcing commercial flights to change their paths. Breaks up next, but coming up on East Asia tonight, offering cheap prices for quality products. How a Hong Kong startup came up with this winning combination in part 2 of our series on the city's young entrepreneurs. Cheap prices for quality brand products. Well, that was the winning combination for Green Price, a local Hong Kong startup. 3 university students came up with an idea for a social innovation competition and turned it into reality. In the second part of a 2-part series to look at Hong Kong young entrepreneurs, CNA's Mei Wong speaks to one of the founders to find out the ups and downs of starting a business.
Hong Kong, known for its bustling and fast-paced lifestyle, waits for no one. The International Financial and Shipping Centre has been encouraging entrepreneurs to step up and contribute to the city's economic development. Hong Kong offers a variety of fundings and programs to assist young people to take the leap into business. One of Green Price's founders, 27-year-old Terence Hon, took that leap 8 years ago. He hasn't looked back since, opening 13 stores across Hong Kong so far. The company sources retail surplus and short-dated stock, such as food and toiletries, from vendors in Hong Kong and other countries. They're then sold at a discounted price by as much as half off the original cost. Starting out was hard, as it took 2 years before Green Price broke even.
You've been running your business for about 8 years right now.
Yes,
tell me,
right.
what is the biggest hurdle when you first started your business?
We have no knowledge in retailing, and we are doing everything ourselves. So it's very physical, challenging. And in the morning, we like look after the stores, and afternoon we talk to suppliers, and at night we work in the warehouse. So it's like never ending, and we need to work even during the weekends and holidays. So it's how the progress has been built.
Do you feel as though as a young entrepreneur it's very difficult to get people to listen to you, especially the larger corporations? It's always very difficult to break into that old school business operation kind of method.
Yeah, I do think so. Because in Hong Kong, it's quite dominated by few players. Same for the retail industry, same for developers. So most of them previously look for big brands to put in their shopping malls to stay safe, and for recent few years, because the economy is not that good, so they try to bring in some new players, some local players inside, and it's a pretty good time for us to expand, to get more people to know about us.
These are renowned brands. These are brands that you can find in various supermarkets and pharmacy shops as well. And these are actually purchased by your staff.
Yes.
Your staff are relatively young because you're a young man yourself. Can you talk to us about how differently are you running your business operations as a young entrepreneur, again compared to the older conventional business? You know, how much power are you giving to each and every one of your staff?
I would say our hierarchy is pretty flat comparing to other corporations. Maybe traditionally in the supermarket, when you need to launch new products, you need to get a lot of layers of approvals. It takes months. But then for us, our staff do have their own autonomy. We give them cash amount, and if they perform better, the cash amount will be even larger. And without supporting certain values, they can feel free to purchase stuff they are confident in. So it gives more room for them to perform, and they enjoy the process more and do even better.
How much more difficult will it be to run a startup given the global economic uncertainty as well as competition?
I always think when there is challenges, at the same time there are opportunities. I would say to pivot is very important. You cannot just focus on one area or one kind of products. You need to always be on the field, talk to customers, talk to your staff to know about the real situations, and then make adjustment accordingly. I would say it is like once in a lifetime opportunity to start a business like this. And if I would need to do it again, I would still choose this path. It's more meaningful in our life.
This path, Terence says, will lead Green Price to open up even more branches in Hong Kong and consider expanding overseas, like in Singapore. May Wong, CNA, Hong Kong.
And that's all we've got for your in East Asia tonight, this Wednesday. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia, and you can always look us up on Facebook and on YouTube. Have a good evening.